Who was Stan's favorite artist, either music or books? He was a voracious reader, right?
He was, yeah. I know. I didn't really tune into that very much, but musically, oh yes. Well, Joni Mitchell. You know, I think we discussed that. He described himself as when Joni Mitchell was playing around the sort of Toronto, Hamilton area, Stan described himself as a little fat kid who would go and hang around the side of the stage and watch her play. And I can really see that. You know, he really is a very strong influence on the acoustic guitar, the use of other tunings. You know, even there's occasional vocal mannerisms that, you know, if you dig them out, and you know, you try to lose the sound of his voice and substitute Joni Mitchell's voice, that you could probably find those little turns and you know, little traditional influences that came through Joni Mitchell into Stan, and I think that's an interesting little avenue for exploration, aside from the production things that he latched onto that she used.
Well, you got to know him. Who would you say that Stan Rogers really was like?
Yeah, he, you know, in spite of his sometimes I don't know, impatient attitudes, he really was a very caring person, and both musically and just as far as getting things done on a day-to-day basis. I remember the first road trip I did with him. We went up to Labrador City. We played this godforsaken disco in Labrador City for 2 weeks, and then we went down to Halifax and we stayed in the YMCA, and this would be '76, probably spring of '76, and he was quite apologetic about having to stay at the Y, and in fact soon we moved to one of his relatives' places while we were staying there. He was doing some writing, and he got very involved in writing this material for radio programs with Bill Howell, and he always was really trying, and I felt the recipient of some of this. He was really trying to do the best he could for his guys, and for Garnet and me. You know, he had the responsibility of pulling together a little road trip and making all the bookings himself and doing the driving, and if there was a screw up at the airport, he would be, he would feel like it was his fault and he was putting us through. So I'd be sitting there, well, you know, I don't really mind if the plane's half an hour late. Don't bother yourself about it. And, you know, I have to see him in that kind of light. You know, he really tried to do the best he could. And this was part, of course, of his ambitious nature, because he knew that, I think, that he wasn't going to have to do this for very long. You know, this was definitely the bottom of the heap, you know, playing the YMCA, although, you know, he was starting to do CBC work, but...
Do you think that he was aware he was on his way?
Oh, yeah, I think so, yeah. There's just nobody else really doing what he was doing, and he knew that there was a market for what he was doing, even if that market meant you had to go through only the CBC, that he was expressing things that I don't think anybody was expressing, and in a way that nobody else was using, through the medium of his particular brand of folk music. There were lots of other folk artists even then, well, and before then and since then, but I think he sensed his own uniqueness, and around the time of the Fogarty's Cove album, he had started to focus that on specific things. He was always one to focus on a project and conceive it in very specific terms. You know, Fogarty's Cove album was going to be an album about the Maritimes. It was going to be mostly about, you know, the ocean, the people, boats, fishing. So he wrote a whole bunch of songs to go with it. And there was another radio show that he did that was about relationships. So he wrote a bunch of songs that specifically dealt with specific relationships. He would dream something up and then write about it. He was capable of doing that, like writing songs to order. And that's a very special skill, and I think very few people can do that as well as he did.